USDA programs?
Actually, a little bit of both. The Farm Bill has made, enhancements. So there's, for example, back in 2014, that's when things like supplemental coverage option came out, or stacks for those that are kind of more in the South. Margin protection was started as a pilot. And so those are some things that came as a result of legislation through the Farm Bill. But they also have a process called a 508H process, which allows third parties to work with folks in the industry to create products that might fit, that RMA may adopt. And so we've seen as much usage of those types of third-party groups, the 508H submitters, if you will, to create products as well.
I realize this is probably a couple of steps above you, but where is Farm Credit Service as an industry that you're involved with? How close are you watching Farm Bill negotiations and offering suggestions of ways to make sure gaps are filled or improved?
Yes, Paul. It's very timely because we're going through that right now. The Farm Credit System and Farm Credit Services America, Frontier Farm Credit, we watch it very, very closely. Not only on a daily basis, but probably an hourly basis. We want to make sure we understand the parts of the Farm Bill that are being discussed, that, what are some ways to enhance it or improve it. So we offer suggestions. At the same time, there's a lot of things in there that are really great. We want to make sure that we work hard to protect those. For example, crop insurance is the only safety net we really have in the Farm Bill. So we want to make sure that we do all we can to protect this critical tool for risk management for producers. So we watch it very close.
Do you find there's still a political appetite for it?
Yes, there is. And we'll see that it's the only bipartisan bill that really exists in Congress anymore, where you can get both sides of the aisle to agree on legislation, which that's getting to become a short supply anymore as far as one side willing to work with the other. But the Farm Bill is one where you truly have bipartisan support.
And when you have hearings, field hearings are out there, I'm sure there's representatives of your industry as a whole that are paying attention. Are you hearing certain lines, pages, things are going to have any issue getting passed? I mean, are there sticking points? Are you part of a sticking point, do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of different titles, obviously, to the Farm Bill. So there's a lot of discussion as far as each title, as far as what's working well and, ways to enhance it. But probably the things that you hear about the most, I have to deal with, like the reference prices, that determine, for example, when you look at ARC and PLC, kind of the two federal programs as part of the Farm Bill. The reference prices, are those going to get adjusted or not? And so that's probably the biggest discussion right now. There's been a lot of discussion around some of the ad hoc, disaster payments. And is there a way to make some tweaks to the safety net, whether it's crop insurance or other areas, to maybe minimize some of that reliance on ad hoc programs and make something a little more reliable and a little more assurances for our producers?
Because the ad hoc items are the ones, to me, always seem the more political ones.
Correct.
Than the bipartisan ones.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. When you look at just some of the recent ones, you have, wildfires and hurricanes, and, those are very specific and tragic, events that occur. But to get support for that, sometimes you've got to broaden the coalition and include maybe other elements or add things to the program or to the cost of that disaster to get enough votes to get it passed. And that's where sometimes you get some challenges, or, it creates some challenges within the program to get things like that approved. And yet there's safety nets that are there if people take advantage of, like, for example, a good crop insurance program.
You mentioned those storms and hurricanes, wildfires. Those are all hot topics in the insurance industry as a whole, where you have companies not writing certain policies in certain states. How does that drift over as a potential to farmers and ranchers?
Yeah, Paul, great question. And, A couple of those examples are Florida and California, where you are seeing on the property and casualty side, you're starting to see some, drawback, either reduction in coverage or companies completely getting out of those markets. And so the impact that potentially could have for crop insurance, we keep a close eye on it, is the impact it has on reinsurance. And so while the federal programs like multi-peril crop insurance are fine, but it can start to impact things like some of your private products like hail and wind. Because if the cost of reinsurance goes up, that cost gets borne across a broader market. If it's not within, if it can't be contained within, say, the property and casualty market, the reinsurers might be looking at having to raise rates on all types of reinsurance, just because that's where capital is moving, and that could have an impact on, again, some of the private product rating, if you will, or even availability.
The full discussion will be part of the MTOM release on Tuesday.